everyone, welcome to Cellular Healing TV. I'm Ashley Smith. Today we'll be talking all about hormonal birth control and how to begin to repair the toll it takes on your hormones after years of use. Our guest today, Dr. Jolene Brighten, is hosting an amazing and free online summit called Post-Birth Control Syndrome Awareness Week, and she is here to discuss it with us today. You'll hear about some of the issues the pill can cause that women often aren't told about, and if these issues can go away once a woman stops taking it. You'll also hear what you can do right now if you're on birth control currently or ever have been in the past. But before we get started, let me introduce our guest, Dr. Jolene. Dr. Jolene Brighten is a functional medicine naturopathic medical doctor and the founder of Rubis Health, a women's medical clinic that specializes in women's hormones. She is recognized as a leading expert in post-birth control syndrome and the long-term side effects associated with hormonal contraceptives. Dr. Brighten is the author of Ditch the Pill, a 30-day plan to support women on birth control, help them transition off, and eliminate symptoms of post-birth control syndrome. Most of all, she is a mom, a speaker, and a women's health advocate. Dr. Pompa will be a guest during Dr. Brighten's online summit. So if you want to hear more about his theories on how diet, fasting, and lifestyle can be the keys to hormone repair, you're invited to join him and a panel of amazing experts in the field of women's health. This free event goes live this coming Monday, November 5th. So sign up now so you don't miss a moment. If you or anyone you know has ever been or is currently on hormonal birth control, not only is this an episode you won't want to miss, you also want to be sure to catch Dr. Jolene's event next week. You'll hear more details in this episode. You can also go to repairyourhormones.com for more information about this important event and to sign up. Also, to the practitioners out there who cannot make it to our sold-out Live It to Lead It event that starts today and goes through Sunday in Las Vegas. You can still join us by subscribing to our live stream and virtually attend our 3-day workshop that will give you the latest in cutting-edge treatments and strategies to build your practice. Please go to HCF Events for live stream access, and you can use the code CHTV to take 10% off the price. That's hcfevents.com with the code CHTV. Hope you can join us. It's not too late. So let's get started and welcome Dr. Pompa and Dr. Brighten to this show dedicated to women's health and post-birth control syndrome. This is Cellular Healing TV.
Jolene, welcome to Cellular Healing TV. Gosh, I'm so excited for our viewers and listeners to hear this because, I as I said at the top of the show when we spoke, I teach a lot of seminars, but I still have a lot of clients from all over the world that I coach. And I can't tell you how many have severe hormone dysregulation and or health issues related to it because of the topic today. So with that said, I'll open the can of worms. Wonder how many women are taking birth control, have took birth control. And let me just start with that. Answer that question, because that's how many should be tuning in. That's how many should be listening. If your daughters, family members, yourselves have ever encountered birth control, pay attention, listen to this show. What's the number on that, Jolene?
Yeah, so it's pretty shocking. About 100 million women worldwide are using hormonal contraceptives. And within the United States alone, that number is about 11 million. And the estimates today are expecting about 98% of women. So 98% of all women will at some point have used a hormonal contraceptive, which is pretty staggering. When y'all hear what we're about to talk about, you're going to understand why that number is so staggering.
Mm-hmm. All right, so let me start off like this. How did you get so into this? I mean, you wrote a book. You can give the name of your book, where to get it and all. This is something that obviously you're really passionate about. You must have a story here. What is it?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. What's funny is that I didn't realize until I went into clinical practice that I actually had developed post-birth control syndrome myself. So I had clockwork periods because I dreaded them like crazy. And so I knew my period came about every 28 days. But once I started hormonal birth control, I thought it was my savior. I will admit that. I spent 10 years on the pill and my heavy, painful periods went a bit away. No one asked me about the root cause, of course, but once I ditched the pill, which is the name of my book, and I broke up with it for good, My face exploded with cystic acne. For the first time in my life, I was struggling with acne. My period was completely gone. And I went to my gynecologist, who told me, you have PCOS. You've always had PCOS, and that's the issue. And I was in my second year of medical school. I'm like, hold up. I just learned how to diagnose PCOS. And a woman who has regular cycles to begin with, she does not suddenly develop PCOS. That's not the way it works. And so I, leaned on my background in nutritional biochemistry and what I was learning in medical school. I got my period back. I cleared my skin, but I thought I was a freak. I mean, my doctor was like, that you're the only person this has ever happened to. This is not even, and most of the time the conversation was, what you're experiencing isn't really real, and you need to get back on hormonal birth control. Then fast forward to when I'm in clinical practice, and I start to piece together that every single woman who comes off of hormonal birth control has some kind of symptom or side effect.
Absolutely. So let's talk about that. I mean, what are some of the things that women aren't being told? What are some of the health conditions that they may have that are linked in the science, in the literature, and yet they're not being told because of what you just said? None of them ever. I've never had it one time where I said something, they go back to their doctor, and the doctor says, that's, blah, blah, blah. Not one time of anybody come to me and said, yeah, my doctor told me this is a cause of my birth control or contraceptive. Not once.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's almost taboo. It's like anti-women's movement to question hormonal birth control, which I really think is a huge disservice to society as a whole. I mean, this is not just a women's issue. I mean, these are our mothers. These are our, they bear the future generation of the human species. But, with that, most women don't even know how hormonal birth control works, or that when you use hormonal birth control, your brain and your ovaries stop talking altogether. So you basically induce menopause for as long as you're on it. And when we come off, there can be a hiccup there in reestablishing brain and ovarian connection. And you've seen this clinically. I've seen this clinically. Really, any doctor who's paying attention has made this observation. But it goes so much deeper than that. We now understand with the explosion in microbiome research that gut flora is disrupted. Women are at higher risk of developing an autoimmune disease. It induces leaky gut. It's inflammatory. And, some of these contraceptives are even life-threatening. So we're talking breast cancer risk, stroke, heart attack. And really, there isn't a system that is not affected by hormonal birth control. I mean, how many clients or patients do you see that have thyroid disease and a history of hormonal birth control? The research is there showing there's a correlation.
Absolutely. So here's the question, right? So I have plenty of people who say, well, I came off of that 20 years ago. So once they come off, do these symptoms go away? Does the brain reconnect with the ovaries, and do the problems go away?
In some cases, menstruation will be restored. It doesn't always mean that you'll be regularly ovulating again. But what I've seen clinically is that if you haven't undone the damage caused by hormonal birth control, like replenishing all the nutrients it depletes, like magnesium and B vitamins, if you don't repair the gut, I mean, the gut's just not going to repair all on its own. I wish it did, but unfortunately, antibiotics, estrogens and stress, I mean, all of these things are kind of fighting against you. And then there's the problem that hormonal birth control hits the liver big time. And what the research is showing is that it causes an elevation in sex hormone binding globulin that doesn't just go away because you stop hormonal birth control, which is how women lose their libido for life and have a whole lot of other issues. Because if you're binding testosterone, now we have bone loss, now we have muscle atrophy, now we're gaining weight and we don't know why. And our doctor's saying, just eat right and exercise.
Yeah. I was going to ask about the libido because I have found that, right? I mean, it's, in the history of women who end up, even in their 40s, let alone their 50s, without, just zero. I mean, they have zero libido. There's a history of birth control at some point. So an obvious connection, I've found. I mean, there's, and I have to put out a warning too, because obviously you had said, this affects multiple different systems and indirectly and directly. One of the things that women need to know is the birth control in the 70s, 80s, maybe before, I have no idea, as far back as that, in early 90s, had mercury in it. So it was another toxic form of mercury. But anyways, I mean, so there's a lot here. Okay, so we raised the concern, we raised the problem. What's the solution? I mean, okay, granted, some women are taking it simply for birth control, but other women are taking it because it works in the beginning to balance their hormones. So start with birth control. I mean, what are some of your recommendations if you ditch the pill? That's the name of the book.
Yeah. So, it's very important to me that women understand that I'm not anti-birth control, but really that women deserve to have all the information they need to make the best decision for themselves. The consult should be individualized. All birth control should be individualized based on your family history, your genetics, and what your life currently looks like. And for some women, they absolutely can't be without hormonal birth control. And that's what I'm so passionate about is like, look, if this is what you have to do, we need to safeguard that. But I think no matter where you are at in that birth control conversation, investing in understanding your body through what's called fertility awareness method, which is tracking temperature, tracking cervical position, cervical mucus. You're not going to see ovulation signs. If your hormonal birth control is working, you shouldn't see ovulation signs. But really, this is a method that, as much as I don't know how you were taught, but I was taught, like, don't teach women about fertility awareness method. It's not effective. But when you get into the research of typical use of the pill, it's only about 91% effective. Whereas fertility awareness method done correctly, which, most women, they don't take a back seat to fertility awareness method. They're very invested in doing this correctly if they don't want to become pregnant. It's over 99% effective. So that's one thing I have women consider. I think another, avenue that women really need to be having conversations about with their doctor is using barrier protection. I mean, to pass a woman the pill or insert an IUD and not discuss things like HPV or other sexually transmitted infections, like the pill, these IUDs, the patch, the ring, they're not going to protect you against contracting what could be a serious or fatal illness. And so, we've got the barrier methods as well. There's spermicides, and there's new technology being developed as we speak to actually alter cervical mucus to make it to where the sperm can't travel. And they're touting it as the first side effect free birth control. We shall see, because I think all birth control comes with the side effect. I mean, fertility awareness method, getting pregnant is the side effect of that method.
Yeah, I mean, I like the first one, especially for a married couple. That's what we did, right? Talk a little bit about that. I mean, what do you look for? I mean, you mentioned the viscosity of the mucus. I mean, we looked at those things, of course, timing, et cetera, knowing where you are. But talk a little bit about that. And I'm sure the whole formula is in the book. But, talk a little bit about that for our viewers.
Totally. And this is the thing that I'm sure you've seen this too, that it isn't until a woman wants to become pregnant that she's taught what to look for and how to know she's ovulating. I'm like, why are we not being taught this when we get our period the first time?
Yeah, it's like opposite. Yeah.
It's totally opposite. So when you're using basal body temperature, what that means is that your eyes pop open and the first thing you do is you put a thermometer in your mouth. Now, these days we have FDA approved technology. So Natural Cycles is the first FDA approved fertility awareness method app. So this is where it's called Femtech. So we've got technology now where it is the thermometer. It does the calculation for you. Otherwise, you can chart it by hand. I mean, Taking Charge of Your Fertility has been a #1 best-selling book forever. This shows us how much women are invested in wanting to know about their body. So one thing is we look for basal body temperature. And when you're going to ovulate, that's going to spike. So estrogen and LH, which is luteinizing hormone, they spike to trigger the release of an egg. So your temperature spikes and an egg should follow. But you can also look for changes in your cervical mucus. So the viscosity, as you were talking about, it's much like a raw egg white consistency. So, and what's surprising to me is that I have patients who have been on the pill 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. They've never seen fertile cervical mucus. And they'll actually call my office feeling very frightened that suddenly they're seeing this thick discharge in their underwear. And they're like, something's wrong with me. I think I have an infection. And when we start to investigate, we're like, congratulations, you're ovulating again. This is what we want, because without ovulation, we don't have progesterone. And without progesterone, we are frazzled little beings. We do not love our life the way that we're really designed to.
Yeah, great point. Okay, so now I'm the woman out there saying, okay, wait a minute, I'm on this stuff. Do I just stop? What do I do? How do I come off? What's next? What's your recommendation?
Great question. And the first thing is, if you don't want to have a baby, you better have a backup method. And even if you do want to have a baby, we want to give you a good 6 months minimum to prep your body, if not a year or two being the ideal. And there was just a study published just this fall talking about the increased risk of lymphoma if mama is on the pill and gets pregnant within 6 months. And
Um,
so that's something, an increased risk in childhood cancer, but that risk was diminished if you went more than 6 months out. And so this is very important to understand. You have to replenish your nutrients. You got to love up that mitochondria. You're going to pass that DNA to your baby and your microbiome. So number one is have your backup method. I have a fear that keeps me up at night that everyone's going to jump off the pill and get pregnant, and then and then they're going to be like, that was the generation of Brighten babies.
well, and don't jump off and get pregnant is your point. Well taken.
Totally. And don't stop mid pill pack. So definitely, I don't want to be like, freaking anybody out, but, you hear these things and women will say, okay, I'm just not going to take it tomorrow, but then you're going to get a double period. That's a problem. And so you want to go ahead, finish that pill pack. If you have an implant or an IUD, you need to see a doctor to have that removed. The patch, the ring, some of these other things, they can just be removed when it's time. If it's a depot shot, we've got to wait until that depot shot clears your body. But no matter what you are using, you can start supporting your liver right away, because the liver is the main organ that's detoxifying all of your estrogen. Support your liver, support your bowels, and that's going to go a long way in helping your body naturally detoxify these hormones, and then starting to recalibrate the entire system. And just by doing that, you're going to take stress off the adrenal glands and the thyroid, which then is going to make the ovaries want to work so much better.
Is there ever a time to take the pill?
That is a really excellent question. And there are 2 times that I have used hormonal birth control. So one is in prescribing to patients. So one is menorrhagia. So a woman has such heavy bleeding. So I've had a patient, she was bleeding for 14 days straight. So 2 weeks out of the month, she lost so much blood, she was at the point of needing a blood transfusion. And so that's a situation where we have to shut the whole system down while we work on the root cause, because that could very much become life-threatening. But there's always a plan. Now, the other time is with endometriosis, when the pain is so debilitating, there's such heavy bleeding that woman cannot function. And you and I, we're all about the root cause, but it takes energy, and it takes you feeling, to a certain level of health to be able to do that bigger work. But anytime I've ever used the pill, it is with a plan of having the woman come off and safeguarding her while she's on it.
Yeah. What about cancer? Women have been told that there's no risk of cancer. Some women have been told that it actually helps to reduce the risk of cancer. And yet some people you hear say it actually increases the risk of certain cancers. Talk about that.
Yeah. So, it certainly does lower the risk of some cancers. So like endometrial cancer or ovarian cancer, which makes sense, right? Because your ovaries are downregulated. They're not doing their job. They're not getting the signal. I see doctors use it, PCOS women or women who don't cycle regularly. They're at higher risk for endometrial cancer. So their doctor will then prescribe birth control, because there is evidence to show it downregulates the receptors in the endometrial tissue, which is how it can actually lead to long-term fertility issues in women if those receptors don't come back. So you can have all the estrogen in the world, but if your receptors aren't there, the endometrium doesn't grow, baby can't implant. So you become pregnant and you have a miscarriage, that is pretty much the worst. Women who have to go through that, it's very heartbreaking. Now, when it comes to other cancers, so, there's other cancers like breast cancer is always the big concern. We can't say causation like so many of the birth control studies, but there is a correlation and there's an increased risk. Now, what troubles me about the way they report this is they'll say, well, it's very negligible. It's such a small increased risk. But as you and I know, this is one more drop in the bucket. And if the bucket's already full, then what that means for the individual may very much mean you will develop breast cancer. What does your environment look like? How are your genes functioning? What's your family history? Are you eating vegetables? There's individualized risk factors that aren't being accounted for in a lot of these studies. And so I think it's very important that women are given that information and being able to make that decision for themselves, because certainly, as we know, there are better ways to prevent ovarian cancer or endometrial cancer than, basically taking a hormone that is suppressing your entire system.
You mentioned a lot of different health conditions. What's the number one, like if I'm a woman watching this, what's the number one that you see with taking birth control? And maybe it's a kind of an answer of what happens shortly after and long term. So kind of answer it that way.
Yeah. So on hormonal birth control, number one side effect that I see that's almost across the board is mood symptoms.
Mm.
And, so often a doctor's only looking for the depression correlation, which they're also quick to dismiss. Never mind that we have studies of over 1 million women showing that not only is there an increased risk of being prescribed an antidepressant when you start hormonal birth control, but that our teenage girls are actually at really high risk of suicide when they start that, which says a lot about disrupting hormones in a young woman. But the other thing we can see is there's mood swings, there's panic attacks, there's in anxiety. Women can develop OCD-like issues, and doctors are really quick to meet them with the next prescription
That's
for
right.
that.
Yeah, that's the irritating part to me. Okay, so what about later in life? Let's speed it up. Maybe they've even come off of it. What are we seeing later in life as the number one health condition?
Yeah. So the longer you're on hormonal birth control, the more likely it's going to be that you do not come back to being a regularly cycling female. So there is research that's been showing that the longer we suppress the brain and ovaries from talking, and the earlier we do this, so talking about putting a 14-year-old girl on hormonal birth control when her brain and ovaries just began to talk, and then leaving her on it until she's 34, 44, and that's a long time to go. So we see issues with infertility. We certainly see issues with acne. So there's something called an androgen rebound. Suddenly testosterone goes high. Now women have acne and they're losing their hair. And I actually see a lot of gastrointestinal issues come up when women come off of hormonal birth control. It's, the way I like to say it is, it's the first time your body got an opportunity to talk to you. And you basically, put a gag in your body's mouth and said, I don't want to hear anything from you about my hormones. So when you remove that, your body's going to start screaming and saying, hey, I really want to get some support here. But, that's the tricky thing about post-birth control syndrome. It can be the gut. It can be the mood. It can be, things like inflammation, new onset autoimmune disease. And so there's a lot of things
See
that we
it
can
all the time. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's so disturbing. Why are they putting younger and younger girls on birth control? Why are we seeing that rise right now?
This is where it gets super scary, in that estimates anywhere from 58% to 65% of women using hormonal birth control, their primary reason that prescription was written was for symptom management, for something as benign as acne. Now, certainly if you have acne, I know it's awful. No one wants to walk around with acne, but that's not the kind of thing you're going to die from. And yet you're being put on a contraceptive that does carry the risk of death. There is the risk of mortality. And, it's so often I've had 19-year-old girls who've come in post-stroke because of being on the pill. And it's something as simple as, if they had just screened her genetics before they started on her on that and told her what to look for. There's early signs that we have, but doctors aren't expecting a 19-year-old to have a stroke. So they're not screening for it. They're not doing their due diligence in the PAR-Q for it, which is the plan, the alternative, the recommendations, and making sure the patient has all of her questions answered.
Wow. It absolutely is remarkable. And it irritates me. And this has been probably a surge, I would say, in the last 5 years, where I'm seeing these like young girls, put on birth control. What message does that send too? It's almost like, yeah, we're putting you on it for your acne. However, now you can actually go have sex, right? It's like there's a dual problem in that, I think. Just from a morality standpoint, my gosh.
Well, and the risk of HPV. You put a girl on the pill and then you don't tell her about human papillomavirus. She thinks, I can't get pregnant. That's all I should worry about. And then she ends up with cervical cancer, like later in life. Like, that is a very big problem. And we know that being on the pill, it actually puts you at higher risk of contracting HPV. Your defenses are down on that. And the younger you are when you start to engage in sexual intercourse, the higher the probability is you will contract this. It's the number one sexually transmitted infection at really no one's talking enough about to these young girls.
Well, then they will just give them Gardasil and treat them with psychotropic drugs for the mood changes, and of course then Gardasil, you want to talk about a controversy that's being covered up. That's a whole nother topic for another show. So I don't want to open that can of worms, because I might get really angry. Talk about your book, talk about Ditch the Pill. And, what's in it? I think that if I were a woman listening to this, I would say, okay, I need further resources. Number one, it may be a young girl, teenage girl that has to go to her mother, and she better have answers. I'm sure your book has them. Number two, It may be a nervous mother who's going to her daughter who doesn't want to get off because of acne. They need resources. And number three, someone needs a plan. Talk about the book.
Yeah. So my book really details what to do if you're on hormonal birth control and how to transition off successfully and mitigate the symptoms of post-birth control syndrome. And what I went a little further in my book in that I actually have an entire chapter dedicated to helping you navigate basically your period problems. What do those symptoms mean so that you don't have to use hormonal birth control? So I really wanted to go upstream to help women understand their body, be able to prevent them from getting on hormonal birth control. And then once they're on it, we have a chapter dedicated to liver health, to gut health, to getting your mood back. And it has all of my protocols that I've been documenting in my clinical practice that my patients have been so amazing in helping me test out. And so we can really understand what does it take to heal your body from birth control and how can we keep you safe while you're on it. And I do address the libido issue that comes up and how to get your libido back and get your body ready for baby. And there's an entire 30-day plan with meal plans, supplement guide, lifestyle, and we get really specific on helping you understand what is your hormone imbalance, because it's not the same for everyone, as you know. Sometimes it's cortisol driving the issues. Sometimes it's estrogen driving the issues. And so I really made it a kind of choose your own adventure where there's a quiz in there to understand, okay, which hormones do you need to address? And then this is exactly how to address it. So you can customize and individualize the Brighten protocol.
Is there a time, I always say, look, there's a time and a place for bioidentical hormones, period. But leaning towards bioidentical hormones being a little bit better. But I always say also that it's tough to win the hormone game, meaning that if you don't have a tissue that creates it, all right, it makes it a little bit easier, but it's really hard to win that game. When is there a time for some of the bioidenticals in this case?
Yeah. So, well, I will say if we're talking bioidenticals, to understand that thyroid hormone is non-negotiable. If you don't have thyroid, I hear this from women all the time. I don't want to take a thyroid medication. I'm like, you also don't want congestive heart failure at 40. Like this is a very essential hormone. When it comes to estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, DHEA, some of our sex hormones, these are things that we may use in a woman who has post-pill amenorrhea. So she's lost her period and it's been a long period of time because we want to preserve her bone, her brain, her heart from aging. When it comes to our perimenopausal women, this is where it's one of the areas I get heated, is when a woman over 45 is given hormonal birth control. She's given the pill to manage hot flashes, to manage night sweats, to manage these symptoms of perimenopause. And she's at the highest risk of having a stroke or a heart attack or developing diabetes. And that discussion's not being had. And so I certainly think it's an individualized, situation and you got to talk to your doctor about this, but then using bioidentical hormones, estrogen, always topical, never oral, because that's when we get ourselves in trouble.
Right.
That I think they have great benefit for women's health. And we have to understand that it is really a new phenomenon in human history that women are living so far beyond menopause. And so it, is something that we have to recognize that once those hormones drop, our heart starts aging, our brain starts aging. Women are at the highest risk of dementia. We start seeing our bones aging, and women can quite frankly feel miserable, out of control, not in their body. And I think that bioidenticals, what we know is the amount of estrogen it takes topically to safeguard your bone, brains, and heart is so minimal compared to what we give women orally through the hormonal birth control pill.
No, that's great. All right. So where can women get the book and more information about you and, whatever other information you think they need?
Yeah, so the book is available for pre-sale. It will be out January of 2019, and you can find it anywhere where books are sold, including Amazon, which I think is everyone's favorite these days. And as you know, we are raising awareness, and we've started the first ever post-birth control syndrome awareness week, which you're going to be a part of as well. And so I want to say thank you. Wow. I am so grateful. We have 50 experts in the industry who are really joining together to raise awareness about this important topic, to help women understand these symptoms are not in their head. They are absolutely real. Your body's not betraying you. And there are better ways to manage your symptoms and to stay safe in this world. And what I'm really excited about is through this event, I believe truly, we're going to reach so many women. We're going to have the ability to transform women's medicine for the better.
It's needed. I can't tell you, most of my clients are women who are hormonally dysregulated. Of course, then it leads to autoimmune and unexplainable illnesses, thyroid, diabetes. I mean, we can just keep going down the list. And it's really misunderstood. It's being mistreated. So really glad to team up on this and, bring the message out. Thank you, Dr. Jolene Brighten, for being on the show. You're doing great work. You're a wealth of knowledge, and you stand out amongst those who really, I mean, honestly, you really do. You stand out, in what you're doing, especially in the world you're in. So thank you for doing that.
Oh, I so appreciate you. Thank you for having me here. Thank you for joining us and raising awareness and for being a fearless advocate for women's health.
Yeah, so look for the book and give your website or the website if you need to there, and we'll put it in the show notes as well.
You can find me at drbrighten.com. I have a tricky last name, so it's drbrighten.com. And I have a ton of free resources there and information that covers the whole gamut of hormonal birth control, going beyond the pill, and can help fast track your healing with some of the information I'm sharing there.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Dr. Jolene. Appreciate you being on the show.
Thank you.
Well, that's it for this week. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. To join Dr. Brighten, Dr. Pompa, and a panel of amazing experts on the topic of hormonal birth control and hormonal repair, please sign up for this free online event. Go to repairyourhormones.com. And practitioners, just a reminder that it's not too late to join us in Vegas today through Sunday the 4th, and you don't even have to travel. We are offering tickets to the live stream of our Live It to Lead It event. You can go to hcfevents.com for more information, and you can use the promo code CHTV to take 10% off. We would love to have you join us. We'll be back next week and every Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern. We truly appreciate your support. You can always find us at podcast.drpompa.com. And please remember to spread the love by liking, subscribing, giving an iTunes review, and sharing the show with anyone you think may benefit from the information heard here. And as always, thanks for listening.